What if 1990s with almost a meter of frontal armor weren't defeated by missiles or artillery, but by silence? A silence engineered by Ukraine's electronic warfare teams that froze every radar and blinded Russian air defenses just long enough for a wave of FPV drones to strike. 4 minutes. That's all the ghost window lasted, but those 4 minutes tore apart months of planning from the Russian side. Keep watching, because what happened inside that blackout may redefine how every military plans its next armored advance. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. The question wasn't how Ukraine destroyed a column that day. It was how they seized control over every unseen element around it. For weeks, forward observers had tracked columns of Russian armor moving toward Nova Basan. 216 armored vehicles stretched across the horizon, their movement as deliberate as a slow tide rolling down the highway. The convoy's formation didn't suggest a rush. It was an assumption of dominance. They believed the ground ahead was already theirs, yet every turn, culvert, and tree line had already been mapped by Ukrainian reconnaissance. The kill zone wasn't a fixed point. It was a dynamic environment engineered to trap both metal and communication at once. Ukrainian engineers had spent nights splicing detonator wires through the embankments and covering the seams with fresh dirt. At key intersections, culverts had been lined with shaped charges pointing inward toward likely transit paths. Seismic fuses lay under the gravel, able to detect the ground tremors of heavy tracks before the first tank reached the ambush line. These weren't random obstacles. Each was placed to funnel the advancing vehicles into a corridor where their options narrowed with every meter. Behind the ridgelines to the west, self-propelled artillery waited in a staggered semicircle, barrels angled low enough to drop shells directly into the choke points. To the east, FPV drone teams held their transmitters silent, tracking vehicle signatures through analog optics. Every layer of the defense depended on coordination so fine that a single mistimed trigger could expose the entire plan. And that coordination hinged on one element Ukraine could barely guarantee: timing. Across modern battlefields, success is now defined not by who fires first, but by who dictates when the enemy can see or speak. The battle for visibility is no longer confined to daylight or optics. It extends into the electromagnetic spectrum. To dominate that space requires control over the frequencies carrying radar, telemetry, and command links. In Nova Basan, that control belonged to a single mobile electronic warfare team. The BU Mobile EW unit rolled into position before dawn, its flatbed truck hidden under layers of netting and synthetic foliage. 4 antennas rotated slowly as technicians matched Russian frequencies against preloaded intercept data. Every meter of cable had a purpose. The crew knew they had just one chance to cut an entire armored regiment off from its digital nerves. Meanwhile, Russian confidence rested heavily on its armor and its networked radar support. Years earlier, similar formations had pushed through Ukrainian defenses near Izium with minimal interference. Russian air defense batteries like the S-400 had successfully neutralized low-level drone attacks, and their escorting Ka-52 helicopters relied on encrypted data links for real-time target identification. Those experiences bred certainty. They trusted the systems built to detect and destroy threats long before any pilot or commander could react. But that trust had a weakness: dependence on connectivity. Ukraine's EW operators planned to target exactly that. The decision point came as the column entered the narrowest section of the roadway. Commanders inside T-90s exchanged routine status reports, unaware that each transmission was now under Ukrainian capture range. On a separate channel, the BU unit's leader confirmed signal lock and switched from passive monitoring to active jamming. The entire operation hinged on a blackout scheduled to last roughly 4 minutes. No longer. Too brief and artillery teams wouldn't synchronize with the drone strikes. Too long and Russian backup frequencies might adapt. Still, everyone on that ridge understood what those minutes could accomplish. A short delay would mean the difference between a retreat and annihilation. As dawn light crept over the damp fields, the countdown began. Inside the armored vehicles, Russian crews continued their forward crawl, their command radios alive with static from overlapping transmissions. They were moments away from crossing into the electromagnetic void prepared for them. The BU Mobile EW truck's transmitters buzzed quietly, ready to flood the spectrum. When that signal finally went live, hundreds of tons of steel would stop moving all at once, frozen in a silence they couldn't explain. What happens when an entire armored rush suddenly becomes blind and deaf? When the BU Mobile EW unit activated its transmitters, the effect wasn't gradual, it was absolute. The spectrum filled with dense electronic noise that rolled across frequencies like a storm front made of static. In less than 10 seconds, the data links tying S-400 command vehicles to their radars snapped apart. The Ka-52 helicopters overhead reported loss of signal before their encrypted channels collapsed into silence. Inside the tanks, crew intercoms buzzed with distortion. The feed from aerial reconnaissance drones froze on their screens, leaving commanders staring at images that no longer updated. Every layer of Russian control, from battlefield awareness to missile guidance, collapsed together. Radar operators tried to reboot their systems, but new signals flooded each channel as soon as they cleared another. The resulting interference made screen readouts flicker like broken film. Rangefinders produced scrambled numbers, and missile designators drifted off target mid-flight. Guidance systems failed, leaving rockets cutting across their own formation instead of the sky ahead. For 4 minutes, every second was both triumph and risk. Ukrainian forces knew they were invisible, but they also knew visibility could return at any instant. This perfect silence gave them their narrow window to strike. Across a dozen launch points, FPV drone teams received the green signal. Operators leaned forward, controllers cupped in their palms, eyes locked on the feed. Small quadrators armed with PG-7 VL warheads lifted from prepared sights and gained altitude rapidly. Each pilot tracked his flight path against analog readings rather than GPS, keeping everything under the jamming threshold. Their goal wasn't speed for its own sake, it was synchronization. By the time the Blackout reached its peak, the first wave of drones had already entered the engagement zone, diving into the turbulence of smoke and misfired artillery lingering above the convoy. From the ground, the drones were almost invisible against the haze. One maneuvered through a fractured bridge arch where Russian vehicles had tried to take cover. Another dropped low, cutting between two disabled BMP-2s. The operator aimed behind the rear turret of the second vehicle, releasing the warhead 7 meters before impact. The detonation tore through the storage compartment, and the resulting chain reaction lit 3 nearby trucks like fuses. Ammunition inside began cooking off in bursts of light that briefly revealed the shapes of stalled tanks trying to reverse without any coordination. Artillery teams behind the ridge fired in patterns refined through data relayed from analog observation drones immune to their own jamming filters. Shells struck where Russian formations had compressed, each explosion feeding more chaos into an already silent battle. The coordination was remarkably intuitive. Gunners timed adjustments not by sightlines, but by received analog bursts confirming detonation intervals. The tempo built quickly, 2, then 5, then 10 strikes in under a minute, all targeted through a fog of interference that favored only one side. Within the Russian column, panic replaced structure. Heavy armor that once signified protection now became isolation. The T-90 crews could neither relay map coordinates nor confirm targets. Their onboard computers remained functional, but without external data links, the systems had no networked accuracy. Thick composite armor offered no defense against precision drones homing in by manual control and thermal contrast. Machines built to withstand direct anti-tank fire were now being gutted by warheads, launched from tools that weighed less than 15 pounds. The 4-minute ghost window turned armored columns into monuments of silence. The battlefield didn't shift because of stronger firepower, but because control moved into a space no one could see. Electronic warfare rewrote how dominance is measured, proving that victory favors those who can bend the air itself into a weapon. Metal and explosives stayed the same, but the fight for frequencies decided what lived and what burned. As technology expands, future conflicts may depend less on bullets and more on those who can erase sound, seize communication, and command silence as the final instrument of war.